Thor here, and today I'm going to be talking about my boat's damaged keel. How I fixed it, added on a Bedliner Keelguard, and why I added on a Bedliner Keelguard. For reference, the keel on most boats is the lowest part of the hull. On my boat here you can see there's a bit of damage done to this keel. This is from beaching the boat. Originally I thought I had caused all of this damage, however, after looking it over closer, I realized that I had merely tore off the band-aid that someone else put on it before I owned it. This looks like one of those gel coat repair kits, or possibly a product similar to Marine Tech's. A lot of people try to fix their boats this way, and while these products are good for small nicks, sadly they do not work well for permanent repairs to substantial damage. There are a dizzying array of different ways to fix this kind of damage, as it is so common. The way I'm going to be doing this is a well-proven way to fix light keel damage permanently. For this process I will be taping off the area I'm going to fix, sanding it, and applying epoxy to seal up the damage. I won't be doing any filling as there are no gouges deep enough for it to matter on my hull. For those of you that are not inclined, epoxy is used in the production of fiberglass hulls. It can be applied on the outside of fiberglass hulls and over gel coat. A lot of people would spring for gel coat for a repair like this. The irony to this is that gel coat is generally a form of epoxy. The only reason I would use gel coat in this project is for finish and looks. However, since I will be painting over this, there will be no need to try and color match anything or go for looks. All I'm shooting for right now is a nice smooth hull. I'm sanding with 80 grit sandpaper. This will shorten the amount of time I spend sanding and will also provide a good surface for wetting when I apply the epoxy. I would not recommend a lighter sandpaper than 80 grit. Also make sure to be very careful using an orbital sander on the cutting edge of the keel. It will cut into it extremely fast. When you are working on these areas, never muscle it and always keep the sander moving at a moderate to slow pace. Well, it looks like I'm getting this done just in time. It just started raining. Whew! Job well done. So, as you can see, this is a lot smoother, nicer looking. There's no chips anymore. That should be enough for today. So there's a guy I watch. His YouTube show is called Cullen Craft. I think his name is Cullen. Anyway, he talks about how hard it is to work on these boats because he had to basically sand the whole bottom of his hull. Now I just did a little 15-foot strip. I've done stuff like this in the past. It is no fun. I'll include a link to his videos in the subscription. In fact, I'll include a link to that particular video where he talks about how much work it is. But even the little bit of work you do on these boats, you know, getting underneath them and just having to hold your arms up and hold a sander, it takes a lot out of you. And I gotta say, he's not wrong. I've had this experience before, and it's real fun to see somebody else have the experience to some extent. And as you can see, it's just not a lot of fun. Thor here. So it has been, I think, 3 or 4 days since I started this. Basically, just been waiting on the right weather. It's been raining here. We've been having some extent of the monsoons here. In fact, I'm looking at a rain cloud right now off in the distance, and I'm hoping it doesn't come this way. It hasn't all day. It's been sitting over there. The wind's blowing it that way. The wind's going that way, so hopefully it stays over there. But in the meantime, I got to get underneath this boat, get it cleaned up and prepped for that epoxy. I've got the epoxy, got all my materials set out, so I'm going to get this done. So for the next step, what I'm doing is wiping everything down with rubbing alcohol and preparing the surface for epoxy. There are different cleaners you can use, but I have always had good luck with this, so I just stick to what I know works. So the next thing I got to do is I got to mix epoxy, and this is the epoxy I bought. It is good, and it should work just fine. It's for reference, I think it's Max Bond. With this stuff you got to watch out for crystallization. I don't believe this blushes, but I'm gonna find out if it blushes. We'll find out. Not a big deal if it does. So yeah, we'll get to that. Mixing epoxy ratios is different for other brands of epoxy, so I did not go into details of my particular epoxy. So the key about epoxy is never mix too much of it. So if you mix too much,
then you just waste it, and that's stupid. So if you don't mix enough, you can always add a little bit more and put it on. So I'll probably have to do this again. No big deal though. This epoxy's kind of weird. It has a real brown color to it. I guess I've seen brown colored epoxy before. There's nothing new about that, but just kind of neat, that's all. Alrighty, that looks pretty good. So I'll keep this stick around, put it somewhere nearby, let it dry. Let's get that camera flipped around and start putting this in the boat. Let's get to work.
Rolling on epoxy is my preferred method to apply epoxy. Some brush it on, but in my experience, brushing on epoxy leaves trails, and it does not go on as thick. Most epoxy resin you can apply another coat within a certain time period of applying the first coat without having to sand each coat in between. You can do this with as many coats of epoxy as you wish. In this instance, I am merely going for a thick first coat.
So for reference, this will be my first coat, and I'm going to do this probably 2 more times. I'm going to say this much: this epoxy is actually really good. It's super sticky, and it had no runs. The run thing might happen later. We'll see during the curing process. I was able to put it on really thick. For anybody out there wondering, a good friend of mine taught me this trick. His name was Sid Young. He is the old owner of Standcraft Boats, and I think he's starting up a new company right now. I'm not sure on all the details. I think he's still figuring all of that out, but regardless, he's the one who taught me all about this stuff, and it's absolutely amazing the knowledge he knows. I've actually done this on my old boat. I did a similar repair to this. The thing is if I was just doing this as a repair and I wasn't installing a Keelguard, just for reference, for everybody out there who wants to know this, you would want to color match your epoxy to the actual boat itself, and you can do that with some oil-based paint. You just get similar color match as best you can, roll it on there, and that would probably be fine. If I was doing this as a professional job, there's a couple spots I probably would have filled in, but since I don't really care about that, I'm going to be putting rhino liner on this. It just doesn't matter. But if I was, like I said, doing this as a more professional job, I would have definitely done that. I would have also used a less textured roller, but regardless, just thought I'd throw that information out there. So yeah, I'm going to give this about 45 minutes and come check on my test strip. If my test strip is tacky enough, I'm probably going to throw on another coat. So I'm getting ready to put on my final coat. I was going to do 3 coats on this, but there's no point. This stuff goes on so incredibly thick and so wonderfully. I'm only going to need to do 2, but these are both going to be very thick, heavy coats. So they're easily going to amount what I would normally do with epoxy if I was to do 3 or 4 coats. These are going to accomplish that no problem. So I'm very excited about this epoxy. Super excited to show it off.
If you lay epoxy on at night, always look out for the bugs. They like to get into everything.
One of the things that really freaks me out about doing this at night and in the dark like this, where I live, we've got something called a vinegaroon, and they're tenacious little buggers. They will bite you. Their bites hurt. Some people say that they can only taste vinegar after they get bit by one. I don't know if that's true or not, because according to all the sources I've researched on them, they say that is not true. But some people say it is, so who knows? Alrighty, so the final step is going to be pulling off the tape, and this is what I was hoping for. So it's hard to see in the light, but we're seeing some drips. That just means I put it on thick enough. That's all that means. You can see the bugs are going for it, so I'm going to have to sand them off in the morning.
Always peel off your tape while the epoxy is still wet. If you allow the epoxy to dry with the tape still on, it will bond the tape to the hull, and you will have to score it to remove it, and in some cases sand it to get it off.
See, I peeled off all that tape. Get under here. You can see there's a couple little drips. No big deal whatsoever. We'll let them drip. And the rest of the hull isn't dripping, just that one spot is, which was probably one of the more damaged spots on the boat, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave that there, not too worried about it. But yeah, so technically this hull is repaired, very crudely, but it is repaired. Okay, so it's been a few days, and the epoxy is definitely dry. You can see I did get some bubbles. These will come right off. Or not bubbles, I did get some drips. These will come right off. You can see they're very, very small. And that's all of them. I mean, there's not very many, so it's not like I'm going to be out here filing these all day. Everything dried nice and smooth. It has rained a lot in the last few days. I'm going to have to scrape that off. But yeah, we'll get to work.
Prepping the epoxy for the bedliner is very easy. All I did was lightly sand the epoxy with 80 grit sandpaper and tape off the area I was going to paint. Since this is my boat and I'm not a perfectionist, when I taped the area I was going to paint, I did not tape it perfectly symmetrically, but close enough for me. Something to bear in mind is that a lot of people will tell you to use a primer for your bedliner. The particular bedliner I use is made by a company called Herkliner, and it is a polyurethane-based bedliner. Polyurethane will adhere to epoxy well in most cases, however, just to be sure I double-checked the recommendations for my bedliner. It said if primer was to be used, to make sure to use epoxy-based primer. Since I just laid down a fresh coat of epoxy, I did not feel it was necessary to use primer, as the base for the bedliner was the epoxy I just laid down. The next thing I would like to address is why I chose Bedliner for a Keelguard instead of a traditional stick-on Keelguard or sacrificial fiberglass Keelguard. What a lot of people do not understand about a boat like mine is how heavy they are and how that affects a stick-on Keelguard. My vessel weighs in at around 7,000 pounds fully loaded, and sadly a vessel like mine will rip off a stick-on Keelguard. Stick-on Keelguards are good for smaller vessels, but not so much for bigger. Another option for my vessel is a sacrificial fiberglass Keelguard. Sadly, I do not have the tools or shop to do this, and the local shop I asked about it wanted to charge me more money than what my boat is worth to install one. There is one other option I did not mention earlier. It is possible to get a metal Keelguard installed, however I have only seen these installed on sailboats and I did not want to know how expensive that would be. So I was left looking for alternatives. What I found out about was Bedliner Keelguards. Everyone I've spoken to that has one swears by them. I've even met people who offered to show me their Bedliner Keelguard that had been heavily used on their 35-foot cruiser for 3 years. That was also stored in the water year-round. They said it was still perfect, which was the final push for me to give it a go.
Alrighty, as you can see, I've got the Bedliner on there. It is quite textured, so that's going to be interesting to see how that works out, but I'm pretty sure it'll be just fine. So it's 106 degrees right now, and this stuff is still tacky. Or not still tacky, it's actually starting to dry, so I got to get my second coat on, but it's not even been 2 hours, and this stuff is already drying out, so that's kind of neat. It does cure faster and more temperature and heat, so I'm going to get on that.
A lot of people are against these kind of Keelguards, particularly since they have a very rough surface when applied to the hull that will cause quite a bit of friction with the water. However, everyone I spoke to said that they had noticed no difference in speed or handling of their vessel. Some online reports I read, others had found that they knocked off about a mile per hour off their top speed. However, this was only apparent on much smaller boats. Even if I do lose a mile per hour, the trade-off for the ability to land my vessel worry-free is worth it to me. as handling my boat all by myself can be nearly impossible at times, and the ability to beach, particularly during high winds, is something that I know from experience is a must-have in Lake Powell. The winds here can reach short sustained gusts of 120 miles per hour, and 60 to 70 mile per hour winds are common here. The lake bed is silt, which is not particularly conducive for anchoring, so the best option for boats to survive storms here in Lake Powell is to land. And for those who do not know, storms on Lake Powell are very common. I hope you found this information helpful. If you like my videos or boats or Lake Powell, please check out my other work. I believe you will like what you see. If you like my work, please subscribe. I could really use that kind of help right now. Without taking too much of your time, this is Thor, signing out.